Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. This is episode 407. As always, you can find all episodes of the show, along with links to social media and other ways to contact me, at the podcast page. And that is salcedoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. There's someone making noise outside, and I don't know what they're doing, but anyway. Thank you all for listening, whether you are here for the live podcast recording streams on Discord, or if you listen on YouTube or the podcast feeds, or if you listen on the Trouble Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting. You can find 2 episodes of the show every night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and right before Trouble Minds Radio comes on. Also, you can hear different episodes during the day as well. If you listen, you never know what you will hear. It's all just various shows from all the different people on the network. I've had a couple of those people on. Of course, I've had Michael Strange of Trouble Minds Radio and Rohan of the Exile Minds podcast. I want to thank both of them as well for putting the show together to be put on the radio, including all the music that you hear when you listen to the station at the beginning and the end of each episode. If you'd like to support the shows, there are a few different ways to do that. First of all, there's always rating and reviewing the show on your podcast platform of choice, and then sharing the show with others that you think may enjoy it. Also, if you are into paranormal fiction and nonfiction books, I have written a few of those you can check out on Amazon. And of course, the last way is to donate directly to the show, either through PayPal or Venmo or through Patreon now. And all those links can always be found in all the episode descriptions and on the Discord site as well. So I think that takes care of everything. It's great to be back here after having to take a week off. And I did not care for doing that, but had to be done. So, and also I want to thank my guest for tonight for rescheduling with me on this because, again, I really didn't like canceling, but I was just not in a physical condition to do the show. But so this is part 2 in a series that will happen over time on haunted objects, and so I want to welcome Jen from the Arcane Observer podcast and show on with me. Hello, Jen.
Hey, James. I'm glad you're feeling better, and it's good to hear you and to be here with you hanging out talking about this stuff.
Yeah, thank you. And since the last time you've been on the show, I'm glad to say that you have your own show on the network as well, which is amazing.
Yeah, I'm putting down a couple of streams, a couple a week, thereabouts, what it evens out to. So hopefully people will enjoy that and I don't know, find something that they enjoy listening to, something fun for them to think about. But yeah.
Yes, always enjoy your shows. And so last time we talked about Robert the doll primarily, and then some other things here and there. And I already had the research done for the other most famous haunted doll object, however you want to call it, which of course is Annabelle. So if you want to, I don't know how much you've heard about this before. If you want to talk about that a little bit first.
Well, I mean, I know you have kind of the story to run over, and that would be good. A few things I think I'll just mention before, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that it's so strange about the way that these objects are manipulated by the spirit realm. I think it's so hard to become, I don't know, to even for people to think about this very seriously, because it's not often. These are very rare cases. I mean, even though they are very frequent, they don't usually make it up to the type of exposure that you have with Annabelle the doll being made into a movie, or in the case of Robert the doll, having been, a part of many paranormal investigations and shows and documentaries. But these things do happen, I'm sure, all of the time to different degrees. But I think unless you're actually up close and personal with an object that you suspect to be haunted, which is usually, it would be felt by people who are sensitive. But in the case of Annabelle, just like in the case of Robert, people who weren't even particularly, that were kind of skeptics, honestly, had experiences with these objects and were witness to strange paranormal phenomena that are very hard to explain.
Yeah, and I think the question with that also to me is always how how much of the spirit or spirits that are interacting with the object, how much of them are in the object and how much are just sort of inhabiting the area around the object, and where do
Yeah.
those lines start and stop?
Yeah, and why do they pick those particular, like, Horcrux objects, kind of to coin a phrase from, like, Harry Potter, but, like, why do they choose those particular objects to manipulate? And is there something unique about the item? Like in the case with Annabelle, she was found at an antique store. So I thought that was interesting. Like we can get into the story, and that will help to, like, introduce a lot of the concepts about what could, as far as this case. But just to mention that I think it's strange that they are inhabiting a certain, but why do they latch on to particular objects? In this case, talking about Annabelle, why this doll? Why this Raggedy Ann doll? And in other instances, why is that particular object? It'd make a lot more sense if the object belonged to the person. But in the case of Annabelle, according to the medium, I don't mean to jump ahead, but, like, according to the medium who assisted the original owner of the doll, well, not the original owner, but the owner who received the doll that had the first complaint about the doll that we have documents of, the owner wasn't it was just given to them and it had already been pre-owned by somebody else. So it's not as if there was some type of connection with them to the doll, except that it was just happened to wind up in their hands. And I think that's peculiar, and I'm not even sure that if the spirit too, because in the end, the Warrens decided that the doll itself, that it wasn't even actually occupied by the original owner, like that the doll itself was given as it was given as a gift, but on the property. Why don't you tell the story? And
Yeah, we
then,
can go with that. Yeah.
yeah, because I'm going to start just going into the story thing because of the Annabelle Higgins and all of that. So you just tell the story, and I'm going to sit back, and then I'll just chime in here and there or something when we
Yeah.
have a. Okay.
No, and I think the other main thing that's the major difference between these two, between this and Robert, is this was not made for the person that started having the experiences, whereas Robert either was made or was at the very least purchased right away for their owner. But
Yeah.
I think to start the story here, I have all the links on the Discord in the show notes and sources channel for you all to check out, and of course I'll include them in the episode description as well. And I think the place to start here really with this is something I've debated whether or not to do an entire show on, but because it's people and there's such a sort of a mixed reception, or there's these mixed ideas of the Warrens themselves from all different sides. I'm not going to do that just because I'm more interested in concepts than trying to sort of analyze people. But I think it is important for the story of this particular case to mention them, and that is of course Ed and Lorraine Warren. And so this article here, I have a couple of articles here I'll be focusing on from All That's Interesting, and so I thought I'd start with the first one here is just about the Warrens in general, and they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, which I didn't even know really about that group, but and of course they're really pretty well known for many of their cases. Some say there's even cases that they're known for that they didn't actually have part of really, but again, that's why I don't want to go and do a whole show on
Right.
just them. But of course, some of the places that, in cases you may have heard of, if you're listening, of course, would be the Conjuring House, the Amityville Horror House, which I will be doing a show on at some point. We have the Annabelle thing here, and many others, but I think those are really some of the biggest ones right there. And so this article mentions that before Hollywood basically got a hold of their stories, their experiences, they were literally almost, you could say, regular people who got into the paranormal because of experiences they had growing up. And of course, they eventually found each other and started looking into these things and establishing their own center for this research. And then, which I think is also what led eventually to them having their own museum full of all these objects that they basically said had energy attached to them. And that's a thing that's not exclusive to them. You can find different museums around the world that basically are set up that same way, where they go out looking for, or they have people send them objects that are said to be haunted in a different way, one way or another. So they really they became really two of the biggest figures in the paranormal for many years. And so the first one, this first case this article actually goes into is about Annabelle. Mentions that as of now, Annabelle is in a locked glass box in the Occult Museum. And it is a Raggedy Ann doll, which means it's nothing like what you see, apparently, from what I've heard in the movies, which is sort of I forget if it's China doll, but basically just this really ornate porcelain doll, from what I've heard, which is not what the original is at all. And but there was even and this is later on in history, like closer to recent times, where there were hoaxes centered around whether or not the doll escaped, and we'll get to that that whole concept, not even counting the hoax. But so according to the Warrens report, they mentioned that there was this 28-year-old nurse who received the doll as a gift in 1968, and from there, there's an article on the actual case, so we'll go back for more details, but it started to change positions. And so then the nurse and her roommate started finding pieces of parchment paper with written messages saying different things like "help me" and "help us." So I think I'll switch over from the Warrens article from here and go to the one just about Annabelle. But already that's an amazing story there. And so yeah, let me get to this other article here. So let me see. It looks like they did use some of the same stuff, so I'm just skipping through here. But okay, so the true story of the real Annabelle doll, and of course, this is one of those other cases and or objects that's been featured in or written about in movies. And so let's see here. This so there's this the features of the doll. You can look up these articles here. Really basic overall, but it's still said to be just terrifying to anyone that gets near it. And so let's see here. The first of these the experiences that people had associated with Annabelle go back to around 1970, and it involves, of course, these two young women that had one of them received the doll as a gift. And the nurse that received the doll, there are reports, depending on the source, of the name either being Donna or Deirdre, depending on the source. But we'll just go with Donna just for simplicity here. She got the doll as a gift from her mother for her 28th birthday. And so, and of course, at first, Donna loved it and brought it back to the apartment that she shared So it was another young nurse and named Angie. So Donna and Angie were the two that really this story centered on. And at first, of course, they thought it was adorable. It sat on the sofa in the living room, and but after that, the women started to notice that the doll would move. It would seem to move around the room on its own. And again, this goes back to how the lines of is the doll being animated from within or just sort of picked up and moved around by an energy that surrounds it. And says that Donna would be at home sitting in the living room sofa before work, and then come back in the afternoon and find that this is amazing here. This Annabelle would be back in the bedroom with the door closed. So not only is it moving around, but it's somehow supposedly moving objects, manipulating objects. And then not long after that is when the notes started to appear. Now this is on parchment paper, which the women didn't even own. So here you have manifestations of objects, solid objects that are just appearing like apports, that are going from there. And so this is where Angie's boyfriend comes in. He's known as Lou. He was staying there one afternoon while Donna was out and heard rustling in her room. And so, of course, he went to check it out because he thought someone had broken in. But found nothing like that, but found Annabelle laying face down on the ground. And so there are other versions of the story where at some point he was attacked by Annabelle or whatever was in Annabelle while laying down and taking a nap, to the point where there were even scratches, I believe. So, let's see here. This was before the Warrens entered officially. There was a different medium that claimed the spirit was benevolent and just wanted to be loved and cared for. Now, even without the Warrens, again, if you're having something that seems to be attacking someone, that's kind of hard to really equate with that, but who knows? Again, that's also, I always wonder with this, if there is ever more than one being attached to these objects.
Oh, yeah.
You can have, sort of this positive force that this medium detected. Meanwhile, there's some other force that's also attached that is maybe not in resonance at the time that, that is also there causing these other events. So, I think, let me see here. If you want to go with your thoughts on that so far, Jen, we can go with that.
Yeah. No, I think that's it. What you just mentioned, that there could have been more than one. That's incredible, because it could have been that, because the 7-year-old girl, Annabelle Higgins, that the medium picks up on, that's where that whole name comes from. Apparently, which is weird though, because that's where that comes in. The Warrens don't suggest the name Annabelle or anything like that. Some people try to draw like a correlation between a Twilight Zone episode that came out about a haunted doll, who's and the mother in that episode was named Annabelle. And some people said that the medium pulled off of that. Once again, I don't know, because it could just be a name that was, it could have actually been someone who lived at that location, and people seeking to find a connection could have occurred to them in some way. But the idea being that there was a 7-year-old girl who had passed away in a field where the apartment building had been constructed, and the medium was perceiving that spirit, and that it was kind of maybe playing with the doll, or kind of being around with the doll in some way. That makes a lot of sense initially, but then tying into it that there is this negative thing coming through. So if the doll somehow, if the energy field of the doll had created some type of, a portal, a gateway, where other entities were coming through, and maybe even that maybe the woman or one of the two women there were affected by the presence of the doll, and it would make them even too accessing somehow their psychic energy or something that would trigger that would cause kind of like a perfect storm of things going on. But that's not that doesn't make sense though, because later on when the doll is taken in by the Warrens, it still continues to manifest um strange like levitation and causing unnatural events, and even coming across kind of as like a cursed object where people get hurt who come in who mock the doll. So there did seem to become like a dualistic thing going on there initially, or as many people would just assume that there never was a 7-year-old girl, I guess, and that the medium was picking up on something, but was being lied to or deceived by a malevolent spirit in some way, is what the Warrens kind of suggest,
Yeah, and I can see that either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about the part with the little girl, that part of the what the medium said, but and then the popular culture references, I always wonder about that too, how much that plays or doesn't play. If
I
it's
don't know.
something that sort of maybe the person doesn't, like, the medium didn't even remember that consciously, but somehow it got in.
Or it
Um,
had nothing to do with it, or she did draw off of that. Maybe it drew some type of strange connection by seeing the doll and she thought of the name Annabelle. But she
right.
completely finished out the name. So, I mean, if she was picking, I don't know how they found that medium, but it'd be interesting to find out.
Yeah. Also, you are right about I would think the Annabelle being the further back in time you go, the more common that name seems
Yeah,
like it would be.
I would think so. And
Yeah.
then it's strange too about the writing on the parchment paper that which is not unusual. Like I've heard of other paranormal cases where writing on mirrors, writing on the walls, they
Yes.
said that the writing looked to be like a child's writing, which was even, I'm sure, more, unnerving in a way. But I mean, I wouldn't expect them to write much better, I suppose, since they're just, I'm not sure if the entity is how it's even producing the writing on the paper in this instance. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I think we can get into the Warrens now, that their sort of involvement in this, which really happened because Donna and Angie, when they were, after things had gotten serious, they contacted a local priest, Episcopal, if I can talk, priest known as Father Hagen, and Father Hagen is the one that actually brought the Warrens, let them know about what was going on. So, and of course, as far as the Warrens were concerned, the young ladies, their problems started when they started actually believing that the doll deserved their sympathy. Just for anyone that maybe is not familiar with the Warrens, they very much believed in. It seems like a lot of their cases, everything always came down to it all being negative. And again, not that I doubt that there's negative forces out there, but also I don't think they're as common as Hollywood likes us to believe. But also, if you're looking for that, I could see the Warrens finding more of that as well.
yeah, I
So,
think
yeah,
that was. I mean, they worked for. They were kind of affiliated with the church.
right.
They themselves they were Catholic, and actually unusual that the Catholic Church would even um, allow um, mediums or paranormal investigators to assist them in any way. It's kind of interesting. But then with the Warrens too, these cases they were responding to were always cases of people there. I don't think that they responded to any cases that were not brought to them or prompted by the church itself, where individuals had contacted a church complaining of demonic possession or demonic infestations or frightening events. So they weren't. So they, even though they were paranormal investigators, I don't think that they were usually just going out and investigating as many modern paranormal investigators do. they were usually brought to the scenes of these more um, where people were experiencing frightening things because it was prompted by the church, because the church would turn to them in a way to have them come in to investigate these particular types of hauntings that seem to be more malevolent. So, like again, like you were saying earlier, it is hard to say exactly. A lot of people would say that they were kind of hearse chasing, that sort of thing. But nothing really supports that particularly, though there are it is controversial, but it doesn't have to be, because I
Right.
think, the case itself is very fascinating. And many of the people besides just the Warrens being associated with the Annabelle doll, they didn't create the mythos about the Annabelle doll because people even after their passing, have had experiences. There have been many paranormal investigators who have gone to visit the Annabelle doll at the museum, which is now being run by their son-in-law. And in fact, I saw that they needed to move Annabelle the doll to another case because the case that she's being held in is usually treated with holy water mixed into the stain of the case. So
Ah, okay.
there's particulars that go into the case itself that that Annabelle finds herself in later, and that there's a lot to that. I guess I don't want to get to it right now, I don't think, because you haven't even got to that part there about when the Warrens, how they kind of handle the situation. But um, once again, I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah, no problem.
But
Yeah, no, I agree with the Warrens. They and that is the odd thing. I've never quite heard that explained as to sort of other than being part of part of the religion themselves or associated with it themselves. I've never really heard of exactly how they got involved, other than just looking into that, and maybe that started their reputation as well.
mhm,
And then more of the people within the church itself and churches just started to know about them and ask for their help, which makes sense.
yeah,
So, um, but yeah, so let's see here. Okay, so there was a couple. Actually, it was Hagen and also his superior, Father Cook, that both. So this is going somewhat up in the ranks of the church as far as people that know of the Warrens. So even back then, and of course this is 70s, early 70s, around that time, mid 70s. And of course, again, the Warrens thought that the empathy shown by the two women, Donna and Angie, were part of what sort of started everything in their case. And so the Warrens thought that the entity there was actually quoting from the article here, a demonic entity in search of a human host. Using Annabelle as just a conduit to get there. And so, according to the Warrens, they say that that spirits do not possess inanimate objects like houses or toys. They possess people. An inhuman spirit can attach itself to a place or object, and this is what occurred in the Annabelle case. It says the spirit manipulated the doll and created the illusion of it being alive in order to get recognition. Truly, the spirit was not looking to stay attached to the doll. It was looking to possess a human host. So, and in a way, I mean, like I said, with the things it was able to do outside of itself, that I could see that. Although it is odd, if that's the case, it is odd that it never sort of made such major advances towards doing that to either of the women or towards Angie's boyfriend. This is sort of what I always wondered about: is what is it exactly that keeps these negative entities from going ahead and doing the things that they are supposedly they want to do? And it's not so much a criticism of anyone. It's just I always wonder, and I'm guessing it just must take so much energy even to do that. That might be why that's the case. But anyway, I'm getting off of the story here. So the Warrens, of course, looked into this more and more and thought that now this is something here. They claim that the different things that would happen, including the teleportation, the doll moving on its own, materialization, which is the parchment paper, and the claw marks on Lou's chest, of course, were all signs of a negative, a demonic being. Of course, with the claw marks, definitely I can. I think when it scratches, when it's small scratches, I think in some cases that's maybe isn't always negative. That's just whatever is there trying to get in contact so hard, and it usually taking so much energy just to make any physical contact that those can happen in some cases. But the Warrens ordered an exorcism of the apartment, and from there they took Annabelle out of the area and moved her to their museum. Hopefully, and so hopefully that from there it would not there would be no more activity. Of course, as you mentioned, Jen, and is always really curious to me, is the fact that there has been more activity over many years. So after all that was done, the Warrens documented other paranormal experiences to do with the doll, even just in terms of after they took her out of the apartment. The story is that, and this is amazing, even though it is, I can see it as being terrifying, but the Warrens even had trouble transporting Annabelle to their museum, and they took basically back roads or slower speed roads to get to the museum, just in case the energy attached to this doll managed to manipulate things, physical objects, to cause an accident. And apparently they had events on the way home, including the brakes in the car either stalling or failing several times. And so as soon as Ed Warren used holy water on the doll, basically dousing it with it, the problems with the brakes would disappear. And of course, it went on like this until they brought Annabelle into Ed's study, and there was still activity there. So really, for this whole time, ever since moving in, and what I wonder now is, with the apartment, did the activity stop there? And that's something I don't think I've seen too much about.
Yeah, they haven't. They don't talk about that anywhere that I look, everywhere. Trying to find even, I was trying to find hidden details about the case, just like you. And I didn't find anything really referenced to about Donna or Angie or anything. Because I was curious, it does mention, there are, if you've noticed, and of course you did, that all the different accounts that I found there were variances about the beginning story. Like, I even wondered if the girl had been given, she was gifted the doll, and then, I don't know, I was just trying to find as much as I could, even about the location and stuff like that, and I couldn't find a whole lot about that. But it's interesting that it's hard to believe how potent this case was. It's hard to think about that, and I think that's where a lot of the sensationalism comes. Although people have experienced paranormal, strange things like this, they know themselves do happen, whereas where like cars being manipulated or brakes failing or something like this, it does make you wonder very much about the backstory of this doll and where it came from. As far as the scratches go, about that, he also reported something about, that in the deep sleep, that there was like this, where the doll literally was, glided up him as if the thing was using him as like a medium, as if the spirit was using the doll as some type of way, a conduit of power, to even affect him in one case, which sounds completely incredible, but that it was trying to like forcefully kind of get after him in a way. In the other instance with the scratching, get after it, like he reports in the Warrens on Warren.net on their website that the doll tried to like strangle him or something, which just sounds
Hmm.
completely. It just sounds so like what? It's really hard to wrap the mind around. Then in the case of the scratches, it's more of a disembodied thing that happens. The thing about
Right.
the negative, yeah, and the thing about the negative entities versus the positive entities and which ones were the easiest. I mean, if you're going by the pure, like the spiritists talk about this, a lot of mediums talk about it, that the closest level to the earth are the ones who most want to kind of stay in this realm. And they're a mixture of all types of personalities, just like the same as just like our living world is. That you have both well-intended people and
Right.
malevolent that have different motivations for what they might want. So, I mean, I don't think that it doesn't bother me too much to see either. But the case of a demon, for them to think, um, the Warrens to think there was a demon. Now, like we were just saying a little bit earlier, they were pretty closely affiliated with the Catholic Church. They had in fact, Lorraine Warren, she had a bit of a Padre Pio, who was like the saint that she most often would pray to in a lot of her investigations as far as before going in and the kind of safety. The strange thing about with the Annabelle doll was the extreme level of precaution they take in, for example, the case itself. There was a phenomena about the case because, as you were saying, the Warrens get the doll home after he had to douse it with holy water and do the sign of the cross over it. The sign of the cross comes up over and over again, and in old Cashin, people would do the sign of the cross when going through any threshold or pretty much any reason at all. They would do the sign of the cross. It's an old superstition of the tradition that isn't practiced anymore as much. But making the sign of the cross over the doll and then the dousing it with holy water, and then it ceases and allows them to drive home. So then they get home. He sits it in a chair by his desk. He reported that it levitated on a couple of occasions. Also, too, that a black cat would manifest and would like go up to the doll. He would see like what looked like a black cat. This is odd because I've heard this before. Of course, not the black cat superstition, but accounts of certain spirits coming and appearing as as a black cat, and then also disappearing. But he would see this, so I don't know if he was being affected by the entity in some way to see this. Then, so he and Lorraine, I'm sorry, he was gone to England. So Ed Warren was gone to England, and the doll had just been kind of sitting on that chair, and that doll was being moved around their house as well, apparently, by
Mm.
the entity. But they had a carpenter there one day, and this is the story behind how the case came to be. But the carpenter, like Lorraine and the carpenter were there at the house, and and somehow it came about in conversation that they should build this case for the doll. So the carpenter's working on building the case for the doll, and Ed calls from England, calls Lorraine, and says to Lorraine, "Are you doing something with that doll?" And she's like, surprised to hear this. And she's like, "How'd you know that? Or why would you think that?" And he says, "The spirits told me." And the carpenter,
Mm.
she said, "Spirits told you." She says that out loud. The carpenter hears that, and he gets up and leaves and doesn't finish building the case for that doll, which is really strange. So then they had to have another carpenter come in to finish building the case for the Annabelle doll. But even at that distance, somehow, Ed Warren, who having felt like the spirits told him, this is a very strange thing. As far as that it deviates from a lot of the talk that usually is held by Orthodox beliefs. And this was I think in the 1970s, a lot of this was very. It just sounds pretty. It's pretty fantastic. And then the way that they handle the doll. So I guess Ed Warren believed when they were trying to, because they'd have to move the doll on occasion from case to case because they had another case built and they would work on one case, preparing it for the doll, and then while that was happening, they'd leave it in this other case because they do all this preparations around the case itself that holds this doll to try to keep it in there, so to speak. So they do many different signs, and they do things with holy. I have my window open. I'm sorry, but like,
No, you're good.
so there's noise outside my house. I
Nope,
live
I
in a
don't hear anything, so we're good.
okay. But so they would have to do all kinds of different works with blessed water and with signs and with prayers and with words and all these different things to seal, like to create this force field around the case that the doll would go in. Ed Warren believed that even touching the doll or any of these objects, because the auric field of these objects would mingle with your own auric field, and that was how it began to get kind of cause an effect, so that it would be able to affect you by becoming kind of the energy mingling with your own energy field. And that's according to him on account of this object. So he would say that you should do it very quick. You should prepare a couple of days before by remaining in a state of grace, and then that you should say certain prayers and, do a mass and these sort of things. So he believed, from his religious perspective, that there were precautions that needed to be taken when even handling Annabelle the doll. And they would do those things before they even moved it from one location to another. And then after that, even to wash their hands with holy water after handling the doll.
Yeah.
That's
You know what? I'm wondering. I'm sorry.
really incredible. No, just that it's really
Yeah.
incredible. Go ahead.
I'm wondering with all the continued activity over the years, because I've talked about this before with just locations, but I wonder if this could sort of extend to objects as well. This idea that whatever was going on before may not have been nearly as intense as what is going on now
Yeah.
because of all the focus that starting with the Warrens, but then continuing on, people have put on the doll and on the stories of the doll.
Right.
And because again, I covered the Myrtle's plantation a little while back. I'll be covering other locations where there are legends about the place and about the apparitions that appear there, and yet when you try to dig into them, you can't find historical evidence of those events. And of course, there's always the possibility that those records could just not be there anymore. But then also you have to wonder if just the telling of all the stories, all the legends, and people coming to these places to hear about them and experience them can somehow just all that energy add up. And I wonder how much of that is happening now in more recent times with Annabelle.
I don't know, because nothing seems to happen with that doll unless someone picks it up and tosses it. In the case of a priest who came by their house on one occasion, and the doll at that time wasn't being contained in a case, and it was sitting on an easy chair, and he picked it up and he kind of tossed it. You may have came across the story, and he said, "Oh, Annabelle, you're nothing but a rag doll."
Yes, I did see
Or
that.
something. And then later, when he was leaving, he had troubles with his car and almost was in an accident. So there's a strange same thing with the motorcycle incident where the young man with his girlfriend on a motorcycle, he apparently banged the case that she was in. So he made physical contact with it and also an emotional exchange. Then the energy somehow may have transferred to him on even just the littlest bit. And what that could have done was caused him to just slightly falter while driving his motorcycle or something that could have caused the accident. The girl survived. The girl that was riding in the motorcycle with him survived. And she said her account was that they were laughing about the doll at the time that it happened. The doll isn't usually doing or capable of doing anything as long as it's in that case, even though it's picked up by EMF readers and things like that. When paranormal investigators go into the museum and do readings, which it could be coming from any of the objects in the museum. But I don't know, and I haven't heard a lot about the EVP experiences that they've had with Annabelle the doll. But it is important to note that it doesn't the lore is tremendous, but the artifact itself seems to be kind of inert as long as it's not being handled or engaged with.
Yeah,
And
or
the moment
disrespected.
it's disturbed in some way, as long
Yeah.
as it's kind of sitting there, it seems to be fine. Whereas before it was taken in by the Warrens and put into this protective case, it was scratching people, writing on paper, levitating, moving around. So it was kind of a free for all before it even happened. And then two, the idea is that when people see these things, the normal human being responds with fear. And as they become more and more afraid, if this is some type of demonic entity or some type of malevolent entity of some kind, just like any person who enjoys getting a rise out of somebody, they will continue to do so as long as they're getting that result. And if that energy was feeding off of just getting a rise out of people and scaring them like a bully of sorts, it would become more and more powerful. And then perhaps on some level be able to manipulate their mindscape and make them, I don't know, perhaps hear voices or see things that aren't there, or who knows what power it might have. You know, what these energy, we've heard the results of such things, but I mean, who knows in this case what might have occurred. The Warrens believed that somebody might have accidentally, eventually, within 2 to 3 weeks, actually, they were really specific. They said within 2 to 3 weeks, we suspect that someone what might have gotten hurt, become possessed, or some type of terrible accident might have happened if it had been allowed to continue any longer. So, because I think if you imagine the level of manifestation, the level of manifestation that was already occurring, where moving objects is no small thing, and then if the doll truly was moving and moving in front of people on some occasions for them to see, and then not only that though, but writing, manifesting objects that weren't there before, and then writing on them, that is very powerful already for an entity, an invisible entity that is um, sort of hosting an object, you know, in a way. So I think it is. I don't know what would have happened with it. I don't know if the Warrens, becoming involved, if that was. It seemed to the people who had her initially that it was for them necessary, and now the rest of it's just history. And right now, it's being held by their son-in-law. This doll is, you know.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, no, and I think this is going to be a long series because I think we can find more and more objects that sort of, even if it's maybe not on this extreme level. I mean, it
Right.
doesn't take much for an object to still have some kind of energy around it that is different than usual. But this is definitely one of those cases that is just really interesting on all different kinds of levels. Um,
It
and
really was. It was fun to think about it and look into it with you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that'll basically do it. I don't think unless you have anything else, but I think
No,
we've
I
pretty much
don't
covered it.
actually. And but it is the strangest case. And I think that there are a lot of other objects out there for sure to look into. This one's bizarre because it's been since it's pretty sensational. And, but at the same time, I mean, I wouldn't mind going to seeing the Annabelle doll myself. I'd be intrigued to do that. I don't know about you. Would you go see the doll?
Yeah, I'm kind of. I
You're like,
think
not so much. I'll pass.
maybe. I don't
Maybe.
know. I
I
would
don't
have
know.
to sort of do a lot more because I've gone on a couple of different public paranormal
Yeah.
investigations before, and I always went in with just giving off this energy of like I'm here to learn. I don't mean any harm.
Right.
And I would have to do that, but I think I would even more so. Like even once I left on my way to go to the place, I would
Yeah.
start that process of
Exactly.
that because obviously that is the way I am. I don't ever want to, but also B because just to be safe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you for having me, James. And I enjoyed talking about this with you. And thank you again.
No problem. Thank you for being here, and I invite everyone to check out Jen's YouTube channel and also listen to her on the station. Yeah, looking forward to having you on again at some point. Thinking we're talking next month sometime. So for one of the roundtables. So that'll
Yeah.
be good.
Yep. It's the
So
Arcane Observer. on YouTube, and then they can just hear me on KUAP Troubled Minds Radio Network along with everybody else as well. So,
Yes,
okay. Have a great
definitely.
day. Thank you.
You as well. Thank you. All right. So, thank you all for listening. And I am starting on the regular schedule back up again. So that means tomorrow night I'll be back again with true paranormal stories from the web. Thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care.